Yeah,
So, what is it about your writing that makes it so dark, and why do you think you enjoy that?
I don't know really. I think it's just what I enjoy to read. I like thrillers that do have a dark element to them. Um, but at the same time, I think I try to avoid, well, I don't avoid going dark, but I do try to compensate with a few lighter moments, perhaps a bit of humor in there.
Mm.
And Alex North and a few others have commented on the humor in The Resident. And I think without that element, I think it could be far too grim. So I do try to have a
Mm.
bit of balance going on as well there.
As you've mentioned before, you've got 9 books that, well, this is your 9th book that you've released now. And do you, I know it's hard and it's one of those questions that not many people can answer, but do you have a favorite book?
Ooh, yeah, it probably is The Resident actually.
Okay.
And I'm not just saying that because it is the latest book, but I think I've learned a lot over time. I'm hoping that I've grown as a writer and that my writing has improved. I've tried to learn from authors that I read and admire.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I do actually think it is probably my best book. It might not be the most, in the reader's minds, it might not be that way, but I do think it's the best of the books I've written, yes.
And this is a question I tend to ask the guests that come on, because I am quite one of these people that do tend to judge a book by its cover a little bit, so I guess a little shallow in that respect. Do you have a favorite book cover?
Of mine or
of yours? Yeah.
Mine. Oh, wow. That's a tricky one. Part of the problem is that they change so often. The paperback can be very different from the hardback and so on. I'd say I'd have to go for the cover to Cry Baby. Now, the reason I picked that one, which was my 4th book, so we're going back a bit, but the reason I picked that one is because my wife designed it. So we kind of got together and talked about ideas, and she did the cover design for Cry Baby, which then taken on by the publisher, and they made a few tweaks, but it generally remained the same.
Yeah, it definitely paints a story. I think mine. I do like the look of The Resident's cover. It does give you, and especially when you talked about why the story is what it is, and about people living in the house unknowingly, that image gives you a good sort of insight to that, and I quite like that one.
Yeah, I think so. I like the keyhole on the front as well. It gives you this idea of somebody seeing things that they shouldn't be seeing.
Yeah, I mean, all of your covers, in fact, have in some way, in some of the titles as well, almost relate to some sort of house or home situation. Is that kind of a reflection to your work as well?
Yeah, possibly. I always try to bring in a strong home element into the books, even when all my previous books were police procedurals, really. But the home life was always quite strong in 2 very different series. I had a series set in New York, and then a series set in Liverpool, but the home life was always a key element, I think. It's a good way of exploring the character, to see not just how they react at work, but how they deal with normal everyday people at home as well, when they're not chasing after criminals.
So, David, do you prefer writing series or a standalone book?
There are pros and cons to each, I would say. With a series, you've got a ready-made cast of characters, so you can develop them over time and bring in new elements to their backstory and so on. But on the other hand, on the downside of that is that unless you've got a huge fan base for the series, it can be very difficult to sell the next in the series. So I don't know if you're like me, but when I pick up a book in a shop that looks interesting, if I know it's number 10 in a series, I'm probably not going to buy it until I've read 1 to 9.
Yeah.
Which can be a good thing if I then go and buy all 10 books. But for many people, I think they'll just put it down and walk away.
That's a really interesting thought, isn't it? That if you've spent so many years creating an absolute legacy, that maybe people will be put off buying it completely. The fact that it's more than maybe 2 or 3 books. Yeah. So yeah, definitely that's worth thinking about if you're getting into that world.
Yeah, it's funny because the people who are fans of the series want more of it.
Yeah.
And who don't know the series probably aren't going to dip into it. So it's a balancing act, really. Whereas with a standalone, you would hope that if they pick it up and they like the sound of it, then they would buy it anyway. But from a writer's point of view, it's more difficult because you've got to create new characters, a whole new set of characters. But it's also liberating because you can do what you like with those characters then. It doesn't matter who lives and who dies. You know, you're not committed to continuing their stories for forevermore.
Have you ever thought about, say you finish this series now, a different genre? Would you write in a different genre?
Yeah, I would like to, actually. I've had ideas for books in the genre, but it's a question of time. I've still got a full-time job. I can just about do a book a year at the moment. Maybe when I've got more time on my hands, I could try turning my hand to something totally different. I think if I did so, I'd probably have to maybe do it under a pseudonym or something, because people expect a certain type of book from me. Probably most authors who write within a genre. So, but yeah, it's not something I'm ruling out. I'd love to do that.
Has your process in terms of
David?
Sorry, Chris. Come on.
No, I think we were going to ask the same question there, Chris. But I was going to ask, with managing a full-time job and that commitment, what's your writing process like? Then how do you manage to fit it all in?
Yeah.
So tends to be evenings and weekends, to be honest. I'll come home from work. Well, I'm constantly at home at the moment, but it used to be the case that I would come home from work, we'd have our evening meal, and then I'd disappear up to the study in the loft for a couple of hours and just try to get some words down. And I think if you do that often enough, you can produce a book a year. It's not that difficult, so long as you can maintain that discipline. I think really, discipline is always the key to writing a novel.
Has that process changed much in the time that you wrote your first book to now?
No, I think it's always been fairly consistent. It's just snatching those bits of time that are available, and instead of watching a soap on the telly, you disappear up and just get some words down instead. Yeah, definitely. I remember when I was first starting out, I met Colin Dexter, who wrote the Inspector Morse books, and that was exactly his advice. He would write a page every night, just one page, but over a year, 365 pages. That's a novel. And that's what you got to do. If you can do that, you can write a book a year.
Yeah, some pretty good advice.
It helped me. Colin Dexter was a very interesting guy, and he's full of good advice.
Yeah. Have your characters in your series?
So, David, one of the.
Oh, sorry, Chris. Seemed to be a delay there, and I keep jumping over you.
Yeah. No, it's all right. You finish your question, mate.
I was going to say, the series of work that you've got, have there any characters in real life influence the characters in your book?
Possibly to an extent, although not much, to be honest. I may incorporate character tics or behavioral traits or something, but I never base anyone completely on somebody I know. I remember when I was first starting out, and my boss found out that I was writing novels, and I was a bit worried about how my colleague might react. I thought they might be a bit snooty about it, the fact that it wasn't scientific. So my boss came to see me one day, and he sat down and he said, "What are you doing?" And I told him I was writing novels, and I wondered how he was going to take it. and he said your lead character, this detective. He said he's obviously based on me, isn't he? Yeah, of course he is. So he said, that's all right then, and he just got up and went. but no, it wasn't actually based on anyone in particular. Yeah, I tried to come up with amalgams, really, take a bit from here and there from people I've met and try to coalesce them into single people.
Brilliant.
One of the questions we've been asking this season, just because it's hilarious and some authors have had some really good stories, is do you have any stories of when you've met a fan and it's gone a bit weird?
Yeah. Well, so I wasn't. This probably wasn't a fan as such, as you'll discover. I went to an event in a library, kind of a book club in a library. And it was a smallish group of predominantly women. I think it was all women, actually. And we spoke at length about the book. They asked about the characters and the story and how I got into writing and all that kind of thing. And towards the end, somebody said to me, "Are you going to continue the series?" Because I think this was the first book in the Liverpool series. Are you planning to continue the series? And I said, yeah, hopefully. I've got plenty of ideas for storylines. And one woman piped up and said, are you going to be able to carry on with the lead character, though? And I said, well, yeah, why not? And she said, well, now that he's lost a leg. And I looked at her and said, no, it's fine. And she said, "Oh, sorry, I thought he'd lost his legs and couldn't carry on." She said to me, "You are Jeffrey Archer, aren't you?"
Oh,
So the whole book event, she totally lost.
that's amazing.
I thought I was Jeffrey Archer of all people.
I bet you were thinking at that point.
Did you say in the book Jeffrey Archer?
Yeah.
Yeah, I should put this in the book somewhere, shouldn't I?
Yeah. I bet you were thinking, I didn't write that, did I? Can't remember.
Yeah, no, I did. She did have me confused for quite a while, actually.
Wow. Well, Chris is in a very similar position with his work and his writing, because his writing is kind of on the darker side, and he works for a school, so they're kind of cautious about people finding out about his work.
Yeah,
so hence the hidden face there.
You're going to write a review on him, Chris, or what?
Well, I think that's probably what I'm going to have to do in the future. But I got a new job in September, and then I got a phone. For September, and I got a phone call from the head teacher, and he said, "One of our governors has read your book, and it's brilliant and everything, but we don't necessarily want you associated with it. So is there anything you can do?" So I was like, oh, God. Because I work in a high school, you see, so the content of my book is definitely not appropriate. So hence the hidden face.
No,
and
it's a tricky one, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's knowing how, particularly if you've got a day job, it's how public can you go on these things sometimes? Because you don't want to bring in your institution into disrepute, do you?
Yeah, that's the thing. So, one of the questions that we have, David, on the show is, if you could change the ending to any novel you've ever read, which novel would it be and why?
God, that's a tricky one. Wow. I'd have to give that some thought. I don't know. I think...
Chris, I think we'll have to start doing this question at the start of the show, because everyone needs a bit more time to work it out.
Yeah, I need to be forewarned on a question.
Do you know what? I'll give you a different one, and it's kind of the one that normally goes alongside this, but I'm going to change it a little bit.
Okay.
Because someone said something the other day, and I thought, that's a good idea. And normally the question would be, if you could take a character from literature, fiction, movies, TV, whatever it would be, any character, and do work on them as your own, who would that character be? But instead, well, you can answer that if you really want to, but instead I'm going to say, if you could become any character in life, so you become that character, whether it's fiction or reality, what character would you be, or who would you be?
Wow, another hard question.
Yeah.
These hard questions. So, characters from fiction. What I liked about the later James Bond films by Daniel Craig was that he made them more of a character. He gave them more realistic traits, and I think that it's that type of superhero, if you like. It doesn't have to be Bond. It could be, one of the other superheroes.
Yeah,
he's not a superhero as such, but he's written as if he was a superhero. He gets away with things that normal people can't do. And so I would take a character like that and give them more of a story that we can all sympathize or empathize with, because I think that can make a huge difference. To my mind, character is probably the most important thing in any story. You can have the best plot in the world, but if we're not invested in the characters, then I get quite bored quite quickly. So maybe Bond, or another example was if you watched Logan. Did you watch Hugh Jackman when he played?
Yes.
Again, I thought that was a really good depiction of a superhero because it was all character. It was a character-based film. So I know I'm talking more about films here than books, but clearly Bond was a book character before he was a film character.
No, we love films on here as well, and I think I agree with you. For me, I love Daniel Craig as James Bond, and I think a character has to have flaws, especially someone as like a superhero. Even a superhero needs flaws as well, and he has them in a relatable manner too. So I think that's definitely hits the nail on the head in that respect. Yeah.
So I'm not sure who it would be, but I would pick somebody like that and rewrite them in a more human form, I think.
Oh yeah, that's excellent. Yeah,
so
we
David,
do. Go on.
Did it again. I was going to say a lot of our offers that we've had on season 2, they've had work optioned for like TV and stuff like that. Has that been something that's come across your path as of yet, or how would you feel about that?
Yeah, so one of the highlights for me last year was when my agent put me in touch with 2 other agents who work for United Talent Agency in the States. And so a really surreal evening for me was a 3-way phone call between myself, my agent in Hollywood, and an agent in New York, which was an incredible experience. But that was for the resident. They're really keen on the residents and feel they can find a home for it. So currently that is out on submission to various film producers and production companies. So watch this space. You never know with these things, but even to be optioned is always a really nice position to be in. So
do they take that in the novel format, or have you done a screenplay for that?
No screenplay at the moment. It's current. They've got the novel. The novel is doing the rounds out in Hollywood, etc. And if it gets optioned at that point, I guess we'll talk about a screenplay. Funnily enough, that's another thing that I'd be interested in doing. I'd love to write a screenplay. I'd be really keen to, not necessarily for the resident, but I'd love to have a go at writing a screenplay for something.
I've thought about that as well, and it's something that would be a very different procedure, but also very rewarding, I think. And a lot of people can go through that transition. If, for example, that your book, The Resident, was turned into a feature film, and they were in control of the script, would you be happy to let them do that if you knew that the ending wasn't quite as you set it out to be?
My opinion on this is that if you're going to sign up to a TV or a film option, then you just have to let it go. You have to let them do what they do best, which may involve changing the characters. It may involve completely changing the story. I've heard adaptations which have totally different endings. So far as even changing the killer, that the killer isn't the one who is the killer in the book. And I think that's fine. I think it's a different beast, really, TV and film than a novel. and you just have to let them do what they do best.
So, David, if you had to cast it now,
honest. Sorry, Chris.
If you had to cast it now, and you got the option to pick a few actors for The Resident, who would you cast?
So there aren't that many characters in the book. We've only got half a dozen at most. It's a very claustrophobic setting. And also, when I write novels, although I write quite visually, I don't attach faces to real people, like real actors or anything. Thomas Brogan is kind of mid-20s, fairly young, fit guy. So there are plenty of actors who could probably play that part. And I remember for the Liverpool series, in doing various events and so on, people pictured him in all kinds of ways. I didn't describe him in any great detail, but readers pictured him in many different ways. I remember at one event, a reader saying that she pictured him as a young Daniel Craig, which I don't know where that came from, but that's just how she liked to see Cody from the books. So I'd hesitate to say that Thomas Brogan looks this way or that way, because readers often have very different perceptions as to the characters.
Just waiting to see if Chris is going to jump in there. No, I think we could do with some sort of like little light somewhere up on the screen, so I can know you're going to question waiting. Amazing. Okay, so we had last year. Oh, it's not that long ago. Last season, we had a few staple questions, sort of that weren't so related to writing. But I'm going to bring them back because I think we need some more. We're going to have to think of some more of these, Chris. But as we mentioned films, I'm going to ask, do you prefer Star Wars or Star Trek? Do you have a preference?
Star Trek for me.
Okay.
Yeah. Particularly the original series. I can still rewatch those constantly.
Yeah, definitely. Often people pick Star Wars, and it's nice to have a bit of a difference there.
I really got into Star Wars. I watched, in fact, confession time, I only watched the first Star Wars film, and I've never watched any of the others.
Wow. Well,
that might be a good thing, that, to be honest.
It might be, yeah. I'll probably get some people really upset at that.
There were definitely some hardcore Star Wars fans in the world.
Yeah.
Okay. Pineapple on pizza, is that a good thing or a bad thing?
Good. Yeah, I know it's very contentious, but a Hawaiian pizza for me is one of my favorites.
Yeah. Go on, Chris. Did we have any others? I can't remember. This was basically a battle between me and the other Chris, because I like certain things and the other Chris likes the other things that I don't like. So it was kind of a battle between us, and it,
complement each other. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I think Chris needed a few victories, but we need to find something else that other people like that I don't.
Yeah. The only other one I can remember was Starburst or Skittles.
Oh yeah.
I can't even remember the difference between those. Are they not very similar?
Not really.
Go
on. There was one we had this year, and it was Galaxy or Dairy Milk.
Oh, Dairy Milk, definitely.
Yeah. That's winning again. Sorry, Chris.
David, are you a football fan or?
Yeah, I follow Liverpool. I wouldn't say I was a huge fanatic, but if they're on the telly, I do like to watch a Liverpool game now and again.
Pleasantly surprised this season, then?
Yeah, they've done incredibly well, haven't they? Under Klopp, he's been an amazing manager for them. So
he is a fantastic character. That if someone was to write a book about a football manager, I think they would create a character as good as him, because he is fantastic.
The thing is, everybody likes him. From whatever team you support, everybody likes Klopp pretty much.
He's hilarious.
He is. He's a great character. Yeah.
I could see him in some sort of. He looks like a caricature as well. He kind of he's got that face. Yeah, brilliant.
Yeah, the big teeth.
Yeah. Okay, so do you have any? Go back to writing briefly. Any tips for any beginners that would, and now not towards writing serial killers or creating plot, or just anything basic in terms of when you're starting out writing, this is what you should be focusing on.
I would say write the kind of book you like to read. So don't be too influenced by the market. Don't look at a book and say, well, that's doing really well, I'll try writing a book like that. If you don't write science fiction, don't try to, if you don't read science fiction, don't try to write science fiction. Write the book you like to read. I like to read books about serial killers and Hannibal Lecter and so on, and so that's the type of book I've written. But I think that has to be your starting point.
Yeah.
A genre that you're familiar with, that you're comfortable with.
Do you have a favorite serial killer TV program or film?
It probably would be Silence of the Lambs. I think
Okay.
I've such an amazing, influence on writers everywhere. But a book as well as the film. It's a really good book.
So, David, Desert Island book. Then I'm not going to be so cruel as to tell you to just pick one. Your suitcase is big enough for 3. So, what 3 books would you take with you?
If it's sticking to fiction, just to narrow it down a little bit, I think I would have to take one of the Ed McBain books. So Ed McBain was a huge influence on me. I just loved his style of writing. His 87th Precinct books have been around for a long, long time now. I think the first one was back in the 50s. But most of them have stood the test of time. But it's not so much the plot. It's more the characters and the way he writes, or the way he wrote. That's been a big influence. So one of the 87th Precinct books, I think, would certainly have to go in the list. What would be the other 2? I don't know. Again, I'd have to think about that.
You would have been happy with one book, Chris.
Warm me on some of these questions.
Go on, I'll give you another random one as we're going on random questions. If you had a dinner party and you could bring back 3 people or 3 guests of any kind, who would you pick for your dinner party?
Wow.
We're filling you with random questions here that put you on
the spot. Probably a really influential scientist, perhaps. Someone who changed the face of science. So like Einstein or Isaac Newton, going further back, somebody like that, who how did they come up with the ideas they had? It wouldn't be just about understanding the science. It'd be more about what led them to do these things, to make these breakthroughs. So I think somebody like that would have to be one of my guests.
It is amazing when you look back at those sort of inventions. Oh, go on.
Who would be on your list?
Well,
I'll throw it back at you.
I think I'd have to have someone musical. Possibly, I think, why not Bob Marley? Sit him in the corner with his guitar.
Yeah.
There's my entertainment and a little chat at some point. I'd have to have someone who's very good in the kitchen to host the party. I'm not sure who that would be.
Okay.
And someone funny to maybe Robin Williams.
So I'd go for Frank Skinner.
Okay.
I find Frank Skinner hilarious. I just don't know how he manages to be so witty. He would liven up any party for me.
Yeah. So I think I'd cover all bases. So I'd have nice food on the go. I'd have a good music there, and I'd have someone to laugh at as well.
Yeah. No, that's
what
good.
About?
Good.
Go on, Chris.
I'd have to have Pep Guardiola, Shakespeare. Yeah, Pep Guardiola, Shakespeare. And then, I like the music element, so maybe Prince.
Prince?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
Be a very interesting party, that I should
have. That would be very strange.
So, David, like, you know quite a few fellow authors and stuff now. Is there anyone in particular, if you would give them permission to write with them and they were like, let's go together and create something special, who would that person be in your mind? Who would you like to write with?
So of books I've read recently, one author particularly sticks in my mind, and that's Chris Whitaker. Chris Whitaker, who wrote We Begin at the End. That's his latest book, but he's had a couple out before that. And he's just such a great writer. He's a young guy, just starting out with his novels, but he writes so beautifully. And I'd love to, give him one of my stories and say, you write it properly, because I think he could write it so much better than I can. So Chris would certainly be very high on my list of authors to work with. But he's doing it on his own, I think.
Tell me, David, when you've got 9 books out, and I know me and Chris we're on our first debut books, and we're getting ready for our sequels and those sort of things. But I religiously look at my reviews and probably take things a bit too close to heart, and just very aware of what's going on. When you're 9 books in and with a full-time job, do you sort of drift away from that, or are you still quite engaged with the responses you get and those sort of things?
I think you do drift away from it a bit. Not for everyone. I think some people read every single review that appears anywhere. I tend to avoid reviews now. Not because I get millions of them. It's just because I don't. It's just because, as you say, you can take them to heart sometimes. If you're not in the best of moods and you see a review that gives you a 1 star or whatever, it can just ruin your day. And I don't see the point, because a lot of these people are there just to try and have a dig at anybody they can and to get a reaction out of them. So I tend to avoid that kind of thing now. I certainly don't react to that. I certainly don't, write back or anything. But yeah, at the end of the day, what difference does it make? It's just one person's opinion. On the other hand, sorry, go on, Chris.
Sorry, I was going to say, who's your go-to reader then, David? When you finish the manuscript, whose hands do you look to put it into?
My editor. So my editor currently is Miranda Jewis at Viper Books, and she, I have to say, is one of the best editors I've ever worked with. My editor is always the first person to see my book, even before my wife. So I'd rather have an edited book before I allow my wife to read it. And Miranda is just this incredible editor who can pinpoint really quickly what is wrong with a book and how to fix the book. And a good editor is worth the weight in gold, definitely.
It's interesting. I mean, with a publisher, when you get signed, do you feel like you've lost a lot of control with the book, or do you feel like that's a comforting thing to have with you?
I think it's more of a comfort. I think that I don't see it as handing over control at all. To be honest, all the editors I've worked with have always said that at the end of the day, it's my book, and the final decisions are pretty much mine. At the same time, you need to make sure you listen to your editor. It's very rare that I would never ignore a comment. I might oppose it. I might do something differently, but I would always have a reason for doing so. I would say, I've not done it the way you've suggested it, but I've done it like this because A, B, and C. So long as you have your reasons, I think it's fine to do that. But to be in that position, you need the feedback in the first place. So yeah, to me, the editing team, the sales team, the marketing people, they're all part of one large machine, all there to support you and do their best for you. If we're going to sell books, I do my bit and then I hand it over to them to do their bit.
It's good that everyone's out for the same thing, isn't it? It's all for the same drive, so it kind of does work together. We have had some stories where some people have not worked well with certain publishers and then worked really well with others. So it all depends on finding that match, I guess, doesn't it? But for a lot of self-published authors, that's something that they may or may never get to experience, I guess. So, it's their journey to find out if they do go down that route. But
yeah, and I think even if you are self-published, I would still say employ the services of a good editor. It's very difficult to spot the flaws in your own writing sometimes. You can have beta readers or whatever you want, but I think a good editor should be able to find and fix mistakes and flaws in any book, really. Yeah. None of us are perfect. We all make mistakes.
That's definitely one of the things with my my book that has been highlighted, and it's had great reviews, fantastic reviews. I never expected it to do so well. But the one thing that has been highlighted is the fact it needs a good edit. And the only reason it never did is because as a self-published author, a lot of people might be in this situation that finance wasn't on my side to do that.
Yeah.
So instead of probably waiting, saving up and doing the right thing, I was kind of eager to get my work out there. So it has had a little effect. So if people are watching and they're thinking about putting that work out there unedited officially, then maybe it's worth hanging on to, or maybe you're happy to receive the odd review from someone who's got a critical eye in that respect. So, it's each to their own, I guess.
Yeah, and it's not always the publishing team. If you get an agent as well, an agent will often do some editing for you. So again, I've got a really good agent, Ollie Munson at AM Heath, and he's helped me to edit books in the past as well, particularly when we're about to go on submission to a new publisher or set of publishers. So your agent can play an important role in that regard as well.
Chris mentioned earlier that you sort of are in circles with a lot of other authors, and do you have any I don't want to say naughty stories of other authors, or but any stories that we might be interested in?
There are lots of things I know about which I probably shouldn't mention. You tend to hear these things when you go to literary events, and I would certainly recommend, if you're writing in crime and thriller genre, go to things like Crime Fest in Bristol, or the Theakston's Crime Festival in Harrogate is another good one. It's just, they just make it so much easier to mix with big name authors. You go up to the bar in Harrogate, and you'll be talking to Lee Child and Mark Billingham and all the other big authors. But they always say that what you hear at Harrogate stays at Harrogate. So some of I shouldn't repeat.
It sounds like we need to take the podcast to that show and to get some advice, some tips and advice.
You should take the show to Harrogate or one of the other big festivals.
Yeah,
the stuff that goes on there is amazing.
Definitely seems like something we should do, Chris.
Yeah, we've had like quite a few crime writers on this year. We've had Tony Kent, Craig Robertson, Alex North, Steve Kavanagh. So yeah, I reckon we'd not know personally, but they definitely recognise our voices anyway.
Yeah. No, if you can, if you have the opportunity, you do get along to one of these festivals. They're great fun.
I think we will do. David, so just to recap then, your book The Resident came out in July, is coming out in July because we passed it. And I now know what month we're in. And that is the one with a nice red cover on it. And that's your first book of 9. Your last book of 9.
Yeah.
And they can find the information for that on, is it just your website that they should go to look for that work?
It is featured on my website at davidjacksonbooks.com, or you can just find it on Amazon or one of the other retailers.
Mm-hmm.
Or Twitter, Author Dave on Twitter as well.
You can see that at the bottom of your screen now if you're watching on the old YouTube. Yeah, definitely. We will leave links to your work in the website, the Twitter, when we drop your show. And I just want to say thank you so much for coming on, because it's been a pleasure to talk to you.
Oh, you too. Thank you very much. It's been great.
And we will get this out and we will notify you when this does go out. And Chris, do you have any final questions before we wrap up?
Just no more questions. It's just I've got a copy of The Resident on my Kindle, so I'm really looking forward to reading it. And when I've read it, I'll post a review and tag it onto the show.
Yeah, fabulous. Thanks, Chris.
Excellent. Okay, so David, thank you so much for coming on. And I know it's been a bit, this is a whole new thing for us with the old visuals, so we're working on it, and I think it's been great. So it's really good to have you on as a guest, a visual guest as well, which is fantastic for us to turn visual as well as being on the podcast. So thank you so much for being here with us.
Thanks very much. It's been really, really good. Thank you.
Thanks, Dave.
Thank you, David.
Thanks a lot.